Over the last decade, Tesla has been the premier electric vehicle of choice for many buyers across the globe looking for premium electric cars. What started out as the boutique Roadster back in 2008 evolved to become the Model S sports sedan in 2012. Eventually, Tesla introduced their first SUV, the Model X, in 2016, ending with the Model 3 sedan, which was their most affordable vehicle back in 2017. Now, the one vehicle that Tesla has been lacking for a while has been a more affordable SUV, and that's where the all-new Model Y crossover comes to play. It's based on the same platform as the Model 3 sedan, roughly sharing about 75% of the parts. However, it comes with more interior space on the inside and more cargo room to boot. So today I've traveled all the way to my front yard where a local viewer has been so kind enough to lend me his week-old Model Y Performance. And the big question I want answered, is the all-electric Model Y the perfect vehicle for today's modern family? That's what we're here to find out. So by now you should be pretty familiar with the Tesla Model 3. It's been on sale for a little over 2 years, and last year Tesla managed to move a little over 250,000 of these across the world. It's responsible for changing the way people feel about affordable electric cars. So it's no surprise that Tesla would use the Model 3 for the basis of the all-new Model Y. Because remember, everybody is looking to buy a crossover. This is built off the same assembly line as the Model 3. It shares roughly 75% of the componentry. As you can see, having the two cars side by side is very helpful for trying to figure out just how big the Model Y is. Because when I first saw this car in person, they looked like essentially the same vehicle. In fact, the front ends look identical. The headlights are identical, the front bumper is identical. However, what you should notice is the Model Y is nearly 3 inches wider versus the Model 3, which really gives it a different kind of stance when you have them parked side by side. It's also an SUV, so remember, it's about 7.1 inches taller in the overall height. Just seeing the cars side by side, you can really see just how much larger this car is. Now, compared to the Model X, this is still roughly about 2.5 inches lower overall, so it's still, again, a compact crossover SUV. So at 184.8 inches long, the Model 3 is a compact luxury sedan. It's about the size of something like a BMW 3 Series. So of course, the Model Y is also a compact crossover SUV. Now, of course, to make it more spacious, Tesla did lengthen this car by about 2.2 inches. At 187 inches long, this is roughly the same size as something like a BMW X3 or an Acura RDX. The wheels as well are also very unique to the Model Y. This one in particular has 21-inch wheels. These are the Uber turbine 21-inch wheels that are part of the performance upgrade package that you got on the performance trim. And the Model Y has significantly wider tires. These are 255s in the front, staggered with 275s at the back. Now, if you guys go for the 19 or 20-inch wheels, Tesla will fit the car with 255s all around. The Y Performance with the upgrade package is the only one that gives you the staggered look. Now, at the rear of the Y, you can see this is where you're going to notice the biggest difference between this and obviously the 3. This has the same kind of sloping roof design as what you get in like a BMW X4 or an X6. And at first, when I saw this car in pictures, I absolutely hated the design. It kind of looked like a Model 3 that had been stung by a bumblebee and kind of swelled up. But in person, especially in this white with the performance upgrade package and that carbon fiber lip spoiler, you can see the taillights are practically identical to the 3. Similar design, a full LED design. You can tell this is the performance from the dual motor, underscore badge with the red line. There is a little bit extra cladding down here, which is very, expected for an SUV. I actually think that Tesla put just a tasteful amount of cladding on this car to give it a little bit more of a rugged look. And in terms of the ground clearance, Tesla says this has roughly an inch more. So you get around 6.6 inches of ground clearance, which is still very low by crossover standards. Now, obviously, it being a crossover, the trunk capacity is massive on this vehicle. And Tesla says you get around 68 cubic feet of total cargo space. Now, I don't have the figure with the second row seats up, but keep in mind that Tesla also offers a third row in this vehicle, which will be a late availability for about $3,000 extra. It'll be coming in 2021. But the beauty about Tesla vehicles is you have all this underfloor storage over here, which is fantastic. And then the Model Y also gives you an additional underfloor storage over here, because I suspect that's where the third row is going to go. Now, I was reading the owner's manual of this car, and Tesla said that these floorboards here are rated to hold around 130 pounds. If you put stuff down here, it'll hold a maximum of 285 pounds. As usual, there is no spare tire in the back here. Now, if you want to fold down these seats, Tesla offers some unique ways to do that. You can also fold them down from the back seats, but if you want, you can pull this little button over here and you can see the seat folds down and gives you a nearly flat floor. And this is where you're going to get around 68 cubic feet of space, which is a huge improvement over the 15 cubic feet of space that you get in the Model 3. So moving on to the interior for the Model Y, I want to first mention one thing. The interior is identical to the Model 3, although if you look at the seats, they're kind of on this little raised track because again, these are the same seats as the Model 3, but for Tesla to give you a slightly higher seating position, they basically just elevated the seat a couple inches to give you that trademark SUV higher driving position. Now getting inside and shutting the door, it has a slightly more solid feeling or noise versus the Model 3 that I had for about a year and a half. It's still not the most solid sounding thunk. You're gonna get that in some of the German competitors. Now again, this interior is practically identical. You can basically take your pick between this black interior or for $1,000 extra, you can get the white interior. I much prefer the white interior. It's what I ordered, but for those of you who want the free interior, it's literally the exact same as a Model 3, right down to the 15-inch display, right down to the way the dashboard looks, how it's incredibly minimalistic. The steering wheel is the same, the center console is the same. You still have, the little storage down here with a wireless charging mat there, which is actually new for the Y. Before, you'd have to get this as an aftermarket thing in the early 3s, which they started adding in the later 3s. This is a magnetic lid here. If you kind of shut this a little too difficultly, it starts to yell at you to tell you to close it gently because it's, again, magnet. So there's a couple things I'm noticing. The Model Y has more headroom, almost an inch more headroom in the front, which is good because this expansive glass panoramic roof is a continuous piece, whereas the 3 had a little bar here that split the two glass panels together apart. This has just one continuous piece, but it doesn't have that big, massive windshield that the Model X gives you that kind of makes you feel like you're sitting in like a spaceship vehicle. The rest of this interior is practically, again, the same. The seats, I still find them to be incredibly comfortable and supportive. They are 12-way power adjustable for both sides. You have memory seating, of course, on the driver's side. Only a 3-level heat. You still can't get cooled seats in the Model Y. You still can't get a heated steering wheel in the Model Y. Now, I want to briefly talk about the infotainment system, but again, this is Tesla's, 15-inch display. Everything is controlled here from the display. You can open up the trunk, the charge port. You can, push this little car icon here. You can change all your different settings from the mirror settings to the steering wheel controls. Everything is buried in this screen. So if you guys are interested in seeing how this works, be sure to watch my Model 3 video where I go very in depth with this. I'm going to keep this brief. The one thing I am definitely noticing is the Model Y has an off-road assist mode. What that basically does is it puts the traction control in a mode that allows it to let the wheels slip, because if you're driving off-road, you want that. And it also modulates the throttle control so that when you're pushing the accelerator down, it's a more linear feel as opposed to an aggressive feel to kind of help you get out of or unstuck out of situations. This is, again, unique to the Model Y, and what Tesla also got rid of is the track mode. There is no track mode in the performance version, which I think is kind of a good move, although with this car only having 6.6 inches of ground clearance, I'm kind of like, who the hell is going to take this thing off-roading? In terms of fit and finish for this vehicle, I'm noticing the interior is pretty well put together. Most of the stuff, feels pretty identical. There are no squeaks and rattles here and there. It feels relatively solid. I wouldn't say it's luxurious, but on the outside, I did notice there are a couple of panel gaps that weren't really aligning properly. So normally I would just have my editor cover this up with B-roll, but I know this is a big deal for a lot of you, especially you guys who are OCD about build quality. So how does the Model Y stack up? Well, there's a nice little panel gap over here, which is very inconsistent. You can see it's pretty narrow right here. It gets wider over here, so that might annoy some of you who are extremely OCD. Coming around the rest of the side profile, there is another area right here where I'm noticing you can clearly see that this doesn't line up properly. Again, Tesla is learning, but they're still not quite at the level that you expect from other luxury brands. On the door panel here, you can see where the rear door meets the body, the gap gets slightly wider down here as you go toward the bottom. So again, Tesla's learning, but if you guys are extremely OCD and expect 100% perfect build quality, you may want to consider another brand. Not quite as bad as my Model 3, which I had for a year and a half, but it shows that Tesla still has some work to do with the overall build quality, but they are improving over the years. So Tesla says there's roughly 5.3 inches more legroom in the back of the Model Y, and sitting back here, do you think there's more legroom in this car? It doesn't look like it. That's because we're in the back of a Model 3. But the cars are really similar. Let's hop into the Y. All right, so now we're in the back seat of the Model Y, and Tesla says there's around 40.5 45 inches of legroom, 40 inches of legroom. That would make it the most spacious in the segment. And as you can see here, with the seat in my driving position, there is just a crap ton of space. The floor is completely flat over here. The seats also feel slightly more elevated versus what you get in the Model 3. And headroom in this car, there's 1.7 inches more headroom in this vehicle. Even though it's got that slope, drivers who are, over 6 feet tall, or passengers over 6 feet tall, can still get very comfortable in this vehicle. Now, the one thing that I don't like is the seat bottom cushion doesn't feel like it's tall enough for me. It's not, I wish this extended out a little bit more because it feels like a slightly narrow feeling seat back. The seat itself does allow a slight recline. So you can kind of recline it a pretty good amount actually. So if you guys want to get comfortable, you can kind of stare out of the glass roof here, which is nice. Now, because this vehicle is wider, you are noticing the seat gives you a slightly wider armrest here. So if you guys are the middle passenger, it's actually a little bit more comfortable. There's cup holders here that folds down, of course, with the armrest. And then coming over here to the middle seat, you can see, you could fit 3 people across in here because it's about 3 inches wider, but I would have to say it's still a little bit tight. I think the best bet is to have just 2 people back here, or if you guys want to put a car seat back here, the Model Y is definitely going to be able to accommodate that. So as usual with most Tesla vehicles, you're going to get a nice sized frunk when you lift up the hood, because remember, there is no internal combustion engine. Now, Tesla unfortunately didn't have any specs for how large this trunk is, or this frunk is, but I am noticing it is considerably deeper versus the one that you get in the Model 3. It's also a very nice place to put things that you don't want to be, moving around while you're driving this car. Now, of course, while we're underneath the hood, I want to talk about the available powertrains for this car. Currently, Tesla only offers it in dual motor and dual motor performance. Both of them are long range versions. There is a standard range version coming, but it won't be here until the spring of 2021. That is the one that'll start at under $40,000, but of course you're gonna have to wait. Currently, if you guys want a Model Y with the dual motor all-wheel drive, long range, it's going to cost you around $52,000, add about $8,000 for this performance version, which, by the way, the performance version is the one to get if you guys want a bonkers fast SUV, because this has roughly 450 horsepower and 472 pound-feet of torque. Remember, this has the same dual motor setup as the one in the Model 3. Now, keep in mind, the Model Y is a heavier vehicle. Tesla says it weighs around 350 pounds more. So as this one sits, it's around 4,416 pounds. So it's a really relatively good weight for this SUV. Now, what makes the Model Y one of the most efficient SUVs, electric SUVs you can buy, is the fact that Tesla has finally put in a heat pump in this thing. What that basically means is instead of resistive heating, which is what the Model 3 uses, which uses the battery to create heat to put into the cabin, the heat pump in this thing will kind of pull the heat away from the motors, from the outside elements, and put the heat back into the cabin. Now, what that basically does is it reduces the load on the battery. So those of you who live in cold climates can basically enjoy longer range and better efficiency. In fact, the MPGe rating of this car is 121. That's 8 MPGe better versus the Model 3 Performance, a smaller and lighter and more aerodynamic vehicle versus the Model Y. Now, the one disappointment about this SUV is the fact that Tesla does not recommend towing for this thing, which is a big surprise for me. Most of the competitors at least let you tow 1,500 pounds to like 3,500 pounds, but you cannot tow with the Model Y, and that's coming from the owner's manual. Hold on, I'm forgetting something. Oh yeah, the range. That's really important for an SUV like this. If you guys are gonna go for the dual motor and the dual motor performance without the performance upgrade package, you're gonna get around 315 miles of range. Pretty good numbers. However, if you guys like those 21-inch Uber turbine wheels, the range does drop to 280. It still makes the Model Y one of the most efficient crossovers you can get, but keep in mind, the Model X gets slightly better efficiency, but that also has a slightly larger battery pack. All right, so moment of truth. We are finally driving the 2020 Model Y, the performance version. It's the one that I have on order. Been really excited to drive this car ever since Tesla showed it to the world about a year ago. As you can see, this car does have the enhanced autopilot hardware 3.0, so it shows you things like traffic signs, although it's for some reason showing a traffic light here, even though there's not really a traffic light, there's just a stop sign. But all of this stuff, of course, is going to set us up for the full self-driving computer, which this one does not have, but you can add it for about $7,000. But let's put this thing at the drive, get on the road over here. Ooh. So I spent about a year and a half with our long-term Model 3 Performance, and I have to tell you guys, I miss that car. I miss just having an electric car, being able to charge it at home, being able to wake up to it having a full charge every morning. It was just a great driving car that felt like the right type of vehicle for today's modern world of connectivity. The Model Y, of course, just builds on what the Model 3 does because it's riding on the same, third generation full EV platform. It's just a little bit bigger, a little bit taller, a little bit wider, and this is about 350 pounds heavier. So first setting off in the Model Y, I'm noticing quite a few things compared to the last Model X that I drove, which I haven't actually shown you guys a full review on an X, but I did drive one for like a couple hours when I had it as a loaner when my Model 3 was in the shop. The Y drives like a 3. This thing feels very planted. It feels very tight, especially for an SUV. Whereas the X can feel a little bit wallowy and just too big and a little minivan-like at times. This just feels like a slightly bigger Model 3, which is a great thing because the Model 3 is a really excellent driving sports sedan that just happens to be electric. And the Y just kind of builds on that. The steering also has the same kind of heft that you really like in the Model 3. It's not quite as heavy in feel though, which I think is a good thing because this is supposed to be more of a family car. In fact, Tesla traded the track driving mode that the 3 Performance had and replaced it with an off-road driving assist, which you find it by going into the driving section here and putting it in off-road assist. When you do that, it basically disables the traction control and makes the throttle pedal feel a little bit more linear, so it's not going to be overpowering the wheels whenever you're driving that. Driving this thing off pavement. But this is a performance version, so we don't care about the off-road much because this car doesn't have very much ground clearance. But this is my first time flooring it. Let's see how this thing does from a stop. Oh yeah, I definitely missed that. I definitely missed that face distorting thrust. Tesla says 0 to 60 in 3.5 seconds for the performance version, 4.8 if you guys don't pony up the extra $8,000 for the performance. And this thing is just as much fun to drive as the 3 Performance. Not quite as fast. I am noticing slightly off the line. It's not quite as brutal, but when you're going, there's just so much torque. It's instantaneous. That it's just so comical. I love doing this in any Tesla performance vehicle. It's just so much fun. Now, of course, when you do that, it's not going to get the best range because electric cars are just like they can be like internal combustion cars. The more you push the pedal harder, the faster it's going to use electrons and whatnot from the battery. But I have to say, going around these corners on this curvy road, the Y really is an excellent handling car. Now, of course, it's aided by the firmer suspension of the performance version. It's also aided by the fact that we've got 21-inch wheels riding on 275s in the rear and 255s in the front. That's 40 millimeters thicker than a Model 3 Performance wheel and tire package on the 20-inch wheels. So these are fat tires, but despite it having fat tires, it still has a really comfortable ride quality. It is firm, but it's not overly harsh, even though this car doesn't have air suspension. But you'd be surprised how easily you can hustle this car on a back road. I mean, of course, it has that nice floor of batteries, so the center of gravity is nice and low. The weight balance of this car is about 46 in the front, 54 in the rear, so it's very similar to the Model 3. And the one thing I am noticing, when you put your foot down, the whirring noise from the electric motor is a little bit louder than my 3. It's that little, noise that you hear coming from the rear motor that just makes that little whirring noise. So it's a little bit louder. I actually like how Tesla made it louder because it's a little more interesting to hear. And it just kind of reminds you that you're driving something special. Now, in terms of visibility, I feel like I'm driving a 3. I barely feel like I'm sitting up higher in this thing. It only has an inch more ground clearance, so it's really not that much compared to a lot of SUVs. You have these nice side mirrors. The view out of the back, though, is garbage. Like, that window is really small. It's actually worse than the Model 3's view out of the back because the Model 3 had that high, deck trunk lid. This just kind of, has this skinny little window, so I'm surprised that it's not a little bit of a bigger, back window there, especially considering, the big roof of glass that this car has. The seats are basically just as comfortable as my 3's. really cushy supportive seats, which I took that car on a long 14-hour road trip and I didn't have any complaints. I wouldn't hesitate to do this. I do the same thing in this car. The headroom in this car is also plentiful. There's a lot more, height space in this car. In terms of the width space, it's 3 inches wider than 3. It doesn't really feel that much wider to me. I mean, the center console is practically identical in this car. The rear seat though is huge. You guys saw that earlier. But man, this thing could easily compete with an X3M or an X4M. That's really what it competes with. A GLC Coupe 63. Like, what a fantastic driving SUV. So I can see why Tesla, simplified them, the manufacturing process, just based this off of the 3, built on the same assembly line, because the 3 is a fantastic driving car. My only gripe is I wish the interior had more differentiation. I don't like how I feel like I'm driving a 3 just with a little more space. Of course, I understand why Tesla did it. They're trying to conserve costs, but something in here could have been changed to make it feel like I'm driving something a little bit more special. So most Model Ys are probably going to be driven around town and on the highways. So when you're done attacking your favorite back road and just driving the Model Y around town, the driving dynamics of this car are just quite pleasant. I mean, you sit up a little bit higher. It's really quiet in this car, of course, because it doesn't have any, internal combustion engines making any noise. It has a single speed reduction gear. You can see the information display here shows you when it sees stoplights, when it sees lane markers, and when it sees different types of vehicles. And it just has so much power that you can basically pass whoever you want who's going slow in front of you in this thing, and there's just no waiting. It is such an intoxicating experience to drive an electric car. You get used to it very quickly. And the beauty about the Model Y is the way it handles is just so uncharacteristic-like for an SUV. I mean, SUVs are getting to drive better and better every day. And I'm just incredibly shocked. I mean, there's a reason why Tesla is anticipating this car is going to become their best-selling model. I mean, you get everything that you love about the 3, just with the extra space that people have been demanding. So really the biggest competition for this car is the upcoming Ford Mustang Mach-E, which isn't out yet. Tesla beat Ford to bring this thing to market, which is going to be roughly the same price as this car, have similar range, similar performance, so I'm looking forward to driving that. And then of course you've got the other competitors like the Jaguar I-Pace, the Audi e-tron, the upcoming Mercedes EQC, which just don't have the range of this car or the performance. However, those cars do have a tad more luxury on the inside. This interior is again slightly disappointing. If you were expecting it to be a little bit nicer than the 3s, it's basically the same. Although I will say, this car doesn't have any squeaks and rattles in it. It feels very tightly built. It feels like it's been screwed together a little bit better than the 3. It's like Tesla is learning. Obviously, they're learning from their past mistakes on making their cars look a little bit nicer. You can see here, I'm coming up to a traffic light here. It shows you that I'm in a turn lane. It shows you that the light is actually red as opposed to green. So this is, again, all going to lead up to the full self-driving part. This is what auto manufacturers needed to add, is the ability for cameras to recognize traffic lights, recognize stop signs, recognize different types of vehicles in order for that full self-driving to come. I still think it's a few years away, but as you can see, it just turned green. It actually shows it on the screen there. But you can't argue with just how cool the technology is. And it's why Teslas continuously feel like cars of the future. You feel like you're driving a car that came from the future. But the beauty about them is the future is now, and it's just a matter of other manufacturers playing catch up. And I think a lot of the other brands are recognizing that. So in the next couple of years, we're really going to start seeing a lot of electric cars trickle in, which is why I think Tesla wanted to make sure they were on time with delivering this car. So obviously the long range and the performance is here now. Next spring, we're going to have the standard range model, which is the one that's going to be under $40,000. But even this one at $62,000 represents a lot of performance, a lot of technology for the money. Because remember, if you want a similar gas-powered, X4M Mercedes GLC 63S, those are going to be easily $80,000 loaded. So while they do have more luxury, they have more noise for sure. I would argue that they don't have the technology and the straight line speed, which is what people really like with these electric cars. So Tesla has something really magical here with the Y. It may not look super magical on the outside or on the inside, but if you prefer this minimalistic look, you're going to want to put this one at the very top of your shopping list. So I owned a Model 3 Performance for about a year and a half, and I put around 18,000 miles on it. And I have to say, it was one of the few cars that just always impressed me. Not just because it was electric, but because Tesla does electric very impressively, from their extensive supercharging network to the insane performance to their interiors, which are very modern and full of tech, even though they're not the most luxurious. And I have to say, just spending the day with the Model Y, if you guys loved your Model 3, you're going to fall in love with the Model Y because it takes everything that you like about the 3 and just adds a little bit more. It gives you more space on the inside, it gives you more space in the trunk, it gives you a slightly different look, especially with the wheels and the chrome delete package, especially in this white. And really, there are a few little cons about this car. I mean, I could easily complain about the fact that it looks too similar to a 3, but I also understand why Tesla made it similar to a 3, because they're trying to keep the cost down. Because remember, at a starting price of just under $40,000 for the standard range version, this puts it within line of cars like a BMW X3, a Mercedes GLC, and an Acura RDX, for example. However, if you guys are looking to get one of these this year, you're gonna be paying at least $52,900 for the dual motor non-performance. Now, of course, add $8,000 for the performance trim. So this one here with the performance is around $61,000. Now, this one here also doesn't have any additional options on it. So when you add in the destination charge, you're looking at just around $62,000. You can option up a Model Y to be almost $70,000 if you guys add the full self-driving for $7,000, which again, still makes the Model Y a relatively affordable vehicle, because remember, a Model X crossover starts at $85,000 and the performance version is gonna be over $100,000. So Tesla, again, is shooting for the masses for this car, and it's also one of the first all-electric SUVs to come to market, because remember, Ford's Mustang Mach-E is still not coming out until the end of the year. I'm not entirely sure if that's going to be the case still with the coronavirus pandemic. You could compare this car to the Audi e-tron or the Jaguar I-Pace, but this car has 100 more miles of range and way more performance, and it's also significantly cheaper. I had an Audi e-tron earlier this year that was around $85,000. Now, the Audi was more luxurious on the inside. I'd argue that the Tesla was more spacious on the inside. It had more tech, it had more range, it had more performance, and I think that's what people really want when they're looking for an all-electric SUV. So let me go back to the question that I asked at the beginning of this video. Is the Model Y the perfect electric SUV for today's modern family? I can comfortably say yes, because it gives you all the range that you're looking for, all the performance that you're looking for, and if you basically love everything about the Model 3, which was the affordable electric car a couple years ago, the Model Y gives you additional space in the back seat and additional space in the trunk, which is exactly what people in America and across the world are looking for. But with all that said, I hope you guys have enjoyed my full overview on the 2020 Model Y Performance. If you're also looking to see the latest cars I'm testing, be sure to follow me on Instagram at redline_reviews. Like us on Facebook, and as always, guys, please keep subscribing to the Redline Reviews YouTube channel for all the latest reviews. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you all in the next video.